So today's topic is periods. It's often been described as a taboo topic, but the good news is over the past few years, there have been many, including our guest today, many brave enough to enter the field of menstrual health and taking a new look at everything.
So, all of this talk about periods and the fact that I think it's going to be less stigmatized even after this conversation and with all the work that somebody like Nadya is doing and her organizations, I thought it would be incredibly helpful that we know that in the medical world and in the science world, the governing body for us OBGYNs called ACOG has actually deemed the menstrual cycle almost like another vital sign. It's really an incredible window into women's health because if something goes wrong with what's typical about your menstrual cycle, it actually may be a sign of another health or wellness issue. So it's really important that we pay a lot of attention to this, bring any abnormalities or concerns to your healthcare providers' attention and address it. I think that, the menstrual cycle is no longer going to be a taboo subject. Welcome to the Business of the V. Hello, friends and colleagues. I'm Dr. Alyssa Dweck.
And I'm Rachel Braun-Scherl. Each week, we bring you the most fascinating investors, inventors, entrepreneurs, academics, and healthcare practitioners who are making things happen in women's sexual and reproductive health.
If you are a woman, know a woman, have a business, or care about your V health and wellness, fasten your seatbelts and listen in to another informative and inspiring episode.
We are thrilled to welcome our guest today, Nadya Okamoto, who has such a long list of descriptors to introduce her. She's a serial entrepreneur. She's built a nonprofit, a lifestyle brand. She's published a book. She's run for city council. She's still a college student, so gives you a sense that she's still in her early 20s. And she's won numerous business awards, including Teen Vogue's 21 Under 21, L'Oreal Woman of Worth at the very prestigious Glamour Woman of the Year Awards, and Forbes 30 Under 30 in Law and Policy. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wow, Nadya, your background is so incredible, especially for somebody of such a young age. So I think I'm just going to get right to it. Why periods? What's your story?
I mean, I don't think I never dreamed of being period focused in my career. I actually grew up wanting to be a public defender and then an obstetric surgeon because I was obsessed with Addison and Grey's Anatomy.
I'm with you.
Yes, absolutely. I loved Addison. And, but to be completely honest, periods were this thing that I had never thought about until I was like 16. And through conversations with homeless women I was meeting to and from school when I was a freshman in high school, was starting to hear these stories that they're using toilet paper and socks and brown paper grocery bags and cardboard to take care of their periods. And from that moment, it was just the thing that kept me up at night. It was the thing that I would hop out of bed when I was 16 to try to Google and learn more about. I, learned about the global effects around periods. I learned about how in 2014, 40 states in the US had this sales tax on period products, considering them luxury items. And now the number is 30. But I think that it still is today the thing that I'm falling asleep with in my mind, that I'm hopping out of bed ready to get to work on. It just has been this thing that I have overwhelming passion for, that to the point where I still get as heated about it when I talk about it as I did 6 years ago. And I give this, little spiel like 5 times a day.
So when you jump out of bed in the morning, you're involved in so many different things in several companies and organizations. Can you describe what the companies that you're involved with do and how you split your time across these many responsibilities that you have?
Well, I would say that it's really changing now, but when I was 16, I started this nonprofit called Period. I led it as executive director until this past January, and by the time I left, we, had registered over 900 chapters at universities and high schools in all 50 states and 50 countries. And as executive director, I really focused on building out that network, but also really building out the policy advocacy program. And so we were actively working on pushing legislation to take down the tampon tax for period products in schools, shelters, prisons. Did a lot of advocacy around having period products freely available in restrooms of workplaces, and had distributed about 18 million units of product. And so I would say that from like age 16 to age 21, it was like Period as a nonprofit was my main focus. And then for the last few years, pre-COVID, I was on this sort of nonstop book and speaking tour. And then a couple years ago, I joined Juve Consulting, which is a Gen Z marketing agency. That actually my now co-founder again started when he was 16 and now works with over 50 Fortune 500 companies on everything from marketing strategy all the way to full scale implementation. Now has a team of 50 and headquartered in Times Square. And I was like the oldest person at the company until recently when they hired like a 23-year-old CFO. I mean, the company just really scaled. And so I was chief brand officer there and then was doing and then I stepped away from Period and Juve Consulting to start, we're working on pre-seed round right now. We just launched on social. We're doing a shoot later today. Products are coming in March, but building out a period lifestyle brand that's very community centric. I thrive when I have my company, my writing, working on book, and then like freelance on the side.
Who's your main audience with your new lifestyle brand? Are you mainly speaking to Gen Zs? Because, so many women are having menstrual concerns, whether it's with lack of availability of products or feeling like they still have to stick their tampons up their sleeve because they don't want people to see them, or, menstrual habit troubles in which education is so needed.
I mean, I'll say that the beautiful thing about periods is that it transcends age, as you said, right? And transcends backgrounds and geographies. I would say that we are mainly focused on Gen Z from, a target audience perspective. I think that we're now living in a world where, Gen Z is the largest segment of a population in the history of the world, that if you're able to reach Gen Z and build that community, you're able to reach out to other audiences as well, right? I think the other thing that we've been really talking about is how do we build something that also resonates with parents? Because until you're like 18, 20 years old, your parents are probably buying your period products, right? And so all of that, but we are very focused on Gen Z, just given kind of the mediums by how we're trying to reach out to them. But also I think how we see a gap, right? Like I firmly believe that period products have been sold throughout the last century by perpetuating negative stigma around periods, right? Like buy our products to hide your period, to forget you have a period, to make sure no one can detect that you're on your period. And what we're kind of trying to do is like flip that on its head, right? And so you can see, even going to our social media, like we're very honest about this conversation. We show the menstrual blood. We talk about it in an inclusive way, right? I think that's something I bring up with lots of love too, is like even hearing the intro that y'all gave, like how much room there is for more inclusive conversation, right? Like whenever I talk about periods, I actually don't say like, oh, this is for women and girls. We're building for women and girls. Like this is an issue for women, because it's not just women who get their periods. It's also people who might identify as trans men or non-binary. And so 15% of our community, actually our inner cycle, as we call it, are people who don't identify as women, but still experience their period or menstruation. And so I think that that's kind of what we're really going for, is how do we take these, really strong values of Gen Z, whether it be inclusivity, sustainability, authentic community, and bring it into this space of like natural necessity, biological need.
So, wow. You have done so much in a short period of time to change the dialogue around periods, which is a passion of mine, having been involved in helping to change the conversation around women's sexual and reproductive health. So many boundaries that you've crushed through, or hurdles that you've jumped over, but all entrepreneurs face hurdles, hopefully on their path to success. Can you describe some of the challenges you faced and how you managed them? And with that, what advice you would give to even younger entrepreneurs or newer entrepreneurs.
Here's today's hot flash. Let's talk about a couple of facts and stats that are pretty much overwhelming. First of all, how many menstrual periods do you think an average woman in the US goes through in her lifetime? How about 3,500 days of menstruation? This translates into 7 to 10 years for women that they spend menstruating. A single menstruator will use between 5 and 15,000 pads or tampons in her lifetime over the course of her menstruating years.
I mean, I would say I really reached a hurdle this year, right? So like COVID brings my life in a way as I've been used to it to a stop. No more traveling, no more big speaking gigs in front of people, and no more photo shoots. And I'll also say that like on social media, I faced quite a bit of criticism this summer and feedback of people who were sharing that they felt that I had really hoarded opportunity and visibility as a nonprofit, right? And there was this moment in the summer where I hit a wall mental health wise, where I think that it got to me so much, and I took it very seriously, of course, that I kind of just froze. My organization was becoming a thing. I was hiring my first full-time staff. Oh, and then I decided to run for office, right? Like, I think that I was running on high drive. And then this summer, it wasn't that I burnt out physically. It was that I sort of had this like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Am I the right leader? Am I a good leader? Am I harming the world, or am I, or am I helping the world? And I think all my imposter syndrome like came to the front, and I hit this wall of like intense depression, and just my PTSD symptoms all came flooding back. And I think a lot of it was, when I started my organization when I was 16, and I've talked about this publicly, I would go on stages and I would say, I love what I do, because when I started my nonprofit, I was 16. I was like extremely depressed. I was hurting myself. I was in an abusive relationship where rape and physical assault were a regular part of my life, where I was coming to terms with the fact that I grew up with sexual abuse with my father, and was kind of saying, goodbye, like an end to that relationship. And I felt completely worthless as a young woman beyond like what my body could be used for, right? And it was activism that I was like, oh, my voice means something, and I can change the world, and I can make a difference in my community. And I became completely addicted to it. But the danger that I think caught up with me this year was that when I grew up in that mindset, right, all I derived my self-worth from was work, right? So I was all in on work all the time. A challenge was that like I sacrificed social life, relationships, my health for my work. But it was the emotional, like I couldn't take a break, because when I took a break, I would be like, oh, I'm not worth anything. It would be back in that 16-year-old mindset. And so I actually was admitted to rehab this summer for 6 weeks. And while I was there, it was like, we had to put our fundraising for our capital round on hold. And I like really went away and did this just like really intense mental health work. And I think when I'm now out and building this business, and I consciously made the decision to come back to work. I love what I do. So of course, like it's still a daily thing of like, oh, I'm going to start this new company. And then I talked to my boyfriend and he's like, no, and then, but I would say that that's a big hurdle is, we live in this society as young people where everything can be commodified, right? Everything is now a work. Like my face and how I exist on social media, which is also my social life, is also my biggest source of income, right? And how I speak, how I look and do fitness modeling, like everything becomes about work. And so I would say that the biggest hurdle has really been learning to find value for myself outside of work, which is very hard when like I am so genuinely passionate about what I do that I lose myself in it regularly. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I think that the conversation that is missing from the workplace culture today is that conversation around, making sure that you have a set identity outside of your occupation, and trying to dismantle that aspect of capitalism. Like within yourself too.
Amazing story. And thank you for being so genuine and upfront about this, because I think so many entrepreneurs lose themselves in their work. I know in your spare time you've published a book. Do you want to tell us a teeny bit about that?
Yeah, so my first book came out in 2018 called Period Power, a Manifesto for the Menstrual Movement. Yeah, I mean, I signed and then they gave me a very tight deadline. I wrote it in like a month in over winter break, and it came out. And I mean, it's interesting because I think I still have so much imposter syndrome about it. Like, I have not read it beyond the time when I recorded it for the audiobook. And I think that I have this like warm, shocked feeling anytime I hear that someone's read it. But I mean, it's just, I've just been blown away by the reaction. Like, there's still so many people that I meet on social media, in person, who are like, I now have my own period organization, or I now collect period products because I read this book. And yeah, so that was that book. I've been working on my second book now, which is a lot more sort of memoir style, and like talking about trauma and trying to recover through trauma, and like exactly what I said around this sort of identity component. You know, and I've started to be really open about like my own diagnoses that I'm living with, right? From personality disorders to like the complex PTSD, and kind of how a lot of my mental health, because of the trauma I've gone through, entails that I struggle with any sort of, you know, strong sense of identity. So I think that's kind of what I've really been interested in exploring now, and then for fun doing like some political reporting for a few media outlets.
Wow. So we started with a wow. I think we're going to end with a wow. Nadya, thank you so much for your time and for all the important work you're doing. It is such a pleasure to meet you, and also to hear your openness about really serious, hard challenges and struggles that you've worked through and continue to face as challenges, and being open about how hard that is. Lots of people talk about imposter syndrome, and lots of people have it and don't have the guts to talk about it, and certainly not in their 20s. So thank you so much. And where can people find out more about you? You're everywhere, but for people who want to learn more or get involved in the movement that you've created, where should they go?
You can find me on social or web or anything, just Nadya Okamoto, my full name, at gmail.com. That's my email, and Nadya Okamoto is just like out there as my social handle and everything. August is at It's August on Instagram, it's august.co on web. And for getting involved, volunteering, that's all with the nonprofit period.org.
Excellent. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast at businessofthev.com for the latest trends and trendsetters in women's health and business.